Okay, we're in chapter number 12 of the book of Chronicles. And, we're seeing how that David has been made king over all of Israel. And, there were folks from the northern tribes, which was called Israel, that came to David and wanted him to be their king also. So the kingdoms were brought back together, and but they're going to be divided again a little down the road. But we've seen how numerous valiant men were gathering to him, and we're going to see some more of that in this chapter tonight, chapter 12. Beginning in verse 1, it says, "Now these are they that came to David to Ziklag, where while he yet kept himself close because of Saul the son of Kish, and they were among the mighty men, helpers of the war." So, and the close, where it says David kept himself close, means, he was in hiding. He was having to stay in hiding because Saul wanted him dead. And at different times, when David would come out of hiding, Saul would try to kill him. A couple of occasions, he threw a spear at him, and he wanted him dead because Saul knew that God had removed his spirit from him. Saul knew that David was the new anointed person to be king. So he wanted him dead. And but while all this was taking place, there were a lot of the valiant men, a lot of warriors who were defecting from Saul and coming to David because they saw the goodness in David. And they saw that God was going to be with David. So they were defecting from Saul and coming over to David. And now these men, it says in verse 2, they were armed with bows and could use both the right hand and the left in hurling stones and shooting arrows out of a bow, even of Saul's brethren of Benjamin. So even from the tribe of Benjamin that Saul was from, there were people from that tribe that were defecting and coming to David. And these men that were coming to him were expert marksmen. And they could hurl stones, I guess, with the same type little sling that David used to kill Goliath. They could use either hand, either the right hand or the left hand, in slinging stones. And also shooting their bow and arrow, they were able to use either hand to shoot. So, that is really an amazing feat for them to be able to do that. And these were good warriors that David would need. The chief was Ahiezer, then Joash, the sons of Shemoth, the Gibeathite, and Jeziel, and Pelet, the sons of Asmaveth, and Berekah, and Jehu, the Antothite, and Ismaiah, the Gibeonite, a mighty man among the 30, and over the 30, and Jeremiah and Jehaziel, and Jehanan, and Josabad, the Gerathite. So these men were mighty men that were coming over to David, that were willing to leave Saul's army and come and help David. And it continues on. Eluziah and Jeremoth and Bealiah and Shemariah, and Shephatiah the Haruphite, Elkanah, and Jesiah, and Azareel, and Joezer, and Jeshobeam, the Korites, and Jola, and Zebediah, the sons of Jeroham, the Gedor. So all these people defecting from Saul, they saw that, Saul was losing his mind. He was about to drive him own self crazy. He needed to get back in connection with God, but he wouldn't do that. And when God saw that Saul wasn't going to do that, because he was given opportunity, but he continued on his own and doing things that were against the commands and the statutes that God had laid out. So God removed his spirit from Saul. And no doubt these valiant men saw that, this man, he's going to drive us till we're all dead. And so they were defecting. They were coming over to David. And of the Gadites, there separated themselves unto David into the hold to the wilderness men of might and men of war, fit for the battle, that could handle shield and buckler, whose faces were like the faces of lions, and were as swift as the roes upon the mountains. So all these men that were defecting, coming over to David, these men, they were experts at war. And, he's describing them. They separated themselves unto David to where David was hid in the wilderness. And he shares, they were men of might and men of war, fit for battle. They were ready. They could do whatever needed to be done. And, this was a big plus for David, that he would have these men, and it's going to share in a minute, the amounts of people from every tribe that came to David. And it's bunches. So, they liked David. And they knew that God had placed his spirit on David. So they were going the right direction. So, but not only that, he says they could handle shield and buckler, whose faces were like the faces of lions. I guess they all had just bushy hair and beards, and they looked like a lion with all the hair around their head. And they were rough-looking fellas. It might be to the point that from the looks of these people got scared, afraid of them, and it says that they were swift as roes, as a deer. They were swift. They were good runners, and we got a good runner running now, and but they were good runners. They could do whatever it needed to be to help take care of David. And then it goes back into some of the names. It says in verse 9, Ezer the first, Obadiah the second, Eliab the third, Mishmanana the fourth, Jeremiah the fifth, Adatiah the sixth, Eliel the seventh, Johanan the eighth, Elzabad the ninth, Jeremiah the 10th, Macbaniah the 11th. These were of the sons of Gad, captains of the host. One of the least was over 100, and the greatest over 1,000. So all these folks were, like we've said many times, they're valiant men. And they're able, those that seem maybe to be the weakest, they were over 100 soldiers. Those that seemed to be the best were over 1,000. So, mighty warriors, really, even if it's somebody over 100, that's a pretty good place to be over those and to be able to teach them and guide them and carry them to battle, whatever needed to be done to protect David and to protect the kingdom. And he shares in verse 15, these are they that went over Jordan in the first month, when it had overflown all its banks, and they put to flight all them of the valleys, both toward the east and toward the west. So these men were so ready to help David that when they got to the Jordan River and it's overflowing its banks, they swam across the river just to get across to go to be with David. That's a pretty good feat for it to be out of its banks. I remember one time before that it was out of its banks. We've read, it's been a good while back. They came to Jordan, and God told them it was all out of its banks, and God told them the priests that were carrying the Ark of the Covenant, when they stepped their feet in to the water would dry up and be a wall on one side of them, and it would dry up on the other side that they could get across. But, those men had to have faith. Because here's this river that's all out of the banks, flowing swiftly. They had to step in the water. And now here we've got these men who are valiant men who went across the river Jordan, and out of its banks, it's flowing swiftly. But these men were strong men, and they were able to swim across to the other side. It's kind of, it's like us today. We can say that we're a Christian. And, just being busy about things doesn't make us a Christian. But when we step into the water, when we get ready to work for God and we step into the water, that's when it really starts. And that's what these men had done. They had swam the Jordan River just to get to the other side to be with David. There's a song that the cathedral sang. I love to hear them sing it. And it shares in that song about go out a little deeper. And, and that's so true. We don't need to stay right at the edge where, we need to step out on faith. We need to go out a little deeper sometimes and trust God and do those things that God's laid out for them. That's what these men were doing. They were trusting, and they swam across the Jordan River. And then when they get across the river, they put people to flight that were in the valleys toward the east and toward the west. So they got rid of them. They moved them out. And then it says, and there came of the children of Benjamin and Judah to the hold unto David. Here's David, and we've got folks from Judah, we've got folks from the tribe of Benjamin. The tribe of Benjamin is where Saul was from. So, but these people are coming to David. And David went out to meet them and answered and said unto them, if ye be come peaceably unto me to help me, mine heart shall be knit unto you. But if you come to betray me to mine enemies, seeing there is no wrong in mine hands, the God of our fathers look thereon and rebuke it. David he sees all these folks coming. And he's wondering about, why are they coming? And he comes out to talk with them, and he begins to share with them. If you've come in peace, if you've come to help me, hey, we're going to be knit together like close buddies, close friends. But he says, if you've come to cause trouble, David says, seeing I've done no wrong, he says, God's going to take care of it. And God would. Because God loved David, and David was the chosen one to be king. Now, Saul didn't work out, but you know what? God chose him. And he didn't work out, but you know what? God knew he would. But ultimately, it was all in the plan of God to bring about David. God sent Samuel to the house of Jesse to anoint one of his sons as king. He didn't tell him which one. But he went there, and God had chosen David. Why? Because God knew David's heart. Samuel began to look at these big men of Jesse's, those older brothers of David, how big they were, and surely this is the one that's going to be king. He'd be a good one to lead the kingdom. But God told him then, Samuel, you're looking on the outward appearance. God said, I'm looking on the heart. So he went through all the sons. None of them worked. So Samuel asked, you got any more youngins? He said, yeah, I got one little run-up boy out yonder. He's a shepherd. He's keeping the sheep. But when they brought him to the house, that was the one. And God said, anoint him king. And this is the same David. So David's asking them, if you've come to help, if you've come peaceably, then we're going to be knit together as friends. I'll stand for you, you can stand for me. But he said, if you come to cause trouble, God's going to take care of that. Then the Spirit came upon Amasiah, who was chief of the captains, and he said, thine are we, David, and on thy side, thou son of Jesse, peace. Peace be unto thee, and peace be to thine helpers, for thy God helpeth thee. Then David receiveth them, and made them captains of the band. So when they acknowledged they had come in peace, and they had come to be a part of the kingdom of David, they had come to do the things that would be in line with what God had told them. They were received, and they were made captains over the band of soldiers. And there fell some of Manasseh to David, when he came with the Philistines against Saul to battle, but they helped them not, for the lords of the Philistines, upon the advisement, sent him away, saying, he will fall to his master Saul, to the jeopardy of our heads. So, when David was close there to the Philistines, and, they said, we're not going to worry with David. Saul's going to take care of him. Saul's going to kill him. Saul's going to do away with him. So, but that didn't happen. As he went to Ziklag, there fell to him of Manasseh, Adnah, and Jozabad, and Jediel, and Michael, and Jozabad, and Elihu, and Zilthiah, captains of the thousands that were of Manasseh. And they helped David against the band of the rovers, for they were all mighty men of valor, and were captains in the host. So, here's these men that came, and they began to help David. And David saw that these were mighty men of valor. They were excellent warriors. So, and they were captains of the host. For at that time, day by day, there came to David to help him until it was a great host, like the host of God. So, David's army began to grow, and it grew at such a rapid rate. They're comparing it even to the host of God. It's a large army. And now we're going to begin to see the numbers of the different people from the different tribes that came to David. And these are the numbers of the bands that were ready, armed to the war, and came to David to Hebron to turn the kingdom of Saul to him, according to the word of the Lord. So they came to help. This is your kingdom. God has said it, and we're going to help you seize this kingdom, and it's going to be yours. You're going to be king over all of Israel. The children of Judah that bear shield and spear were 6,800, ready armed to the war. And the children of Simeon, mighty men of valor for the war, 7,100. And of the children of Levi, now Levi was the priestly tribe. The children of Levi, 4,600. And Jehoiada was the leader of the Aaronites, and with him were 3,700. And Zadok, a young man, mighty of valor, in his father's house, 22 captains. And of the children of Benjamin, the kindred of Saul. Now these are kinfolks to Saul, from his tribe. 3,000, for hitherto the greatest part of them had kept the ward of the house of Saul. So, there were some that defected from the tribe of Benjamin, but the bigger part of them stayed with Saul to help try to take care of him and his house. And the children of Ephraim, 20,800, mighty men of valor, famous throughout the house of their fathers. These men were well-known men to be soldiers. They had all the medals, whatever they needed. Like we see all these folks today with all these medals and stuff. And I'm thankful for every soldier we have today. These men were well-known men throughout their tribe. 20,800 of them. So, and then of the half-tribe of Manasseh, which is on this side of Jordan, a half-tribe of Manasseh, 18,000, which were expressed by name to come and make David king. Now, these didn't mind, hey, you know what, we're going to make David king. They didn't mind speaking it out. They didn't mind sharing where they were going, what they were going to be doing. We're going to make David king. And of the children of Issachar, which were men that had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do, the heads of them were 200, and all their brethren were at their commandment. So they sent 200, but you know what? Everybody else would listen to them. If they needed them, they would step up. They would do whatever they needed to do. Of Zebulun, which is such as went forth to battle, expert in war with all instruments of war, 50,000, which could keep rank. They were not of double heart. In other words, they were not going to be wishy-washy. They weren't going to be for David one minute and Saul the next. They were going to be, they're stuck to David, and that's it. They were not of a double heart. And of Naphtali, 1,000 captains, and with them with shield and spear, 37,000. So, he's building up a huge army. And of the Danites, expert in war, 28,600. And of Asher, such as went forth to battle, expert in war, 40,000. And on the other side of Jordan, of the Reubenites and the Gadites and of the half-tribe of Manasseh, this is the tribes that they left on the other side of Jordan. When they came up to the promised land, they saw this land was green, plenty of green grass, and they asked could they stay there with their flocks and their herds. And God said, okay. But of these tribes, 2.5 tribes, the Reubenites, Gadites, and half of Manasseh, with all manner of instruments of war for battle, 120,000. A huge amount of men that's coming to David's defense. All these men of war that could keep rank came with a perfect heart to Hebron, or with, a sincere heart, a sincere purpose to serve. A perfect heart to Hebron to make David king over all Israel, and all the rest also of Israel were of one heart to make David king. So it's going to bring back the tribes together. It wasn't going to be a split kingdom. It was going to be the whole shebang. That's what God had told David. He would be king of Israel, not just king of a couple of tribes. He'd be king of all of Israel. And that's what they're, working towards here. And, what an army that he has amassed of these people that were willing to come to him and go to battle for him. All these men really defecting from Saul. I wonder how large of an army Saul had left when all these men came to David, because if you had all them up, that's a pile of folks. And he already had a huge army that had left with him when he had to go hide. So, and now we've got all these added to it. So they were of one mind and one accord to make David king of all of Israel. They're coming to David. David is a great, and ever how many great grandfathers of Jesus Christ. But David shares that, he was really a son of Jesus, because he is the Father. But, all these men coming to him, it's like, I'd love to see that kind of defection from the world coming to Jesus Christ today. And it would be wonderful to see and to know that people were coming and being saved, and just numerous people. What a blessing that would be. And there they were with David 3 days, eating and drinking, for their brethren had prepared for them. So, all these men, big portion of them, they had to swim the Jordan River. But they came. They didn't mind going through whatever they had to go through to get to David to help him. How amazing that is. How God brought all these people together for an army to set David up to have a huge army, thousands of men of valor, and to make him king of all of Israel. God knew what he was doing. Our God still knows what he's doing. There's a lot of people don't think so, but he does. And he does everything perfectly, and he does it right and in order. But these men were hungry. The brethren that were already there, they had cooked a huge meal for these men, that they might eat and drink and just, kind of rest and cure the hunger that they had. So then he says, moreover, they that were nigh them, even unto Ishkar and Zebulun and Naphtali, brought bread on asses, and on camels, and on mules, and on oxen, and meal, cakes of figs, and bunches of raisins, and wine, and oil, and oxen, and sheep abundantly. For there was joy in Israel. Now, back in the book of 1 Samuel, about the 25th chapter, we read really of this same thing happening, where they brought just bunches of bread and figs and raisins and all the things that they would need to eat and drink. Sheep. They could slaughter them and cook the sheep and have meat to eat. And, it was just a huge, huge feast for these men of valor, for these valiant men who were ready at any given time to go to battle, if that's what it was going to take the kingdom for David. Back the first chapter or the 10th chapter of the book of Chronicles, we read that one chapter in this that was about Saul. And all it shared about was his death. And it was in a battle. And, he died of a sword being shoved through him. And his armor bearer died, and, but that took care of Saul. He was out of the way. And that's the only chapter that we have about Saul. And now, I think I shared last week, the rest of these chapters, even through 2nd Chronicles, is really pointing to Jesus Christ. It's about David and his family, and really the lineage that was pointing to the coming of Jesus Christ. So all this was working out so that God could fulfill the promises that he had made. And that Savior would come through the lineage of David, King David. So, David had a throne, but, God shared with me, there'd come a day that on that throne, there would one be that would never leave that throne, and that's Jesus. So, I love reading about these things and seeing what they did, and, all these men of war that came, it had to be, people had to see it. They had to see it taking place, that these men were defecting and going somewhere. But I don't read where Saul sent anybody to follow him, to maybe find where David was at. I don't know what Saul was doing, but Saul was about crazy. And because he didn't want to lose the kingdom, and he knew that God had removed his spirit for him. God, Saul was angry. But you know what? Saul brought all that on himself. David didn't cause it. Saul did. And when God saw that Saul was not going to turn back to him, hey, I'm done with him. He took his spirit. He sent and anointed David as the new king. And then I think last week we read where that from the northern tribes of Israel that they sent representatives to David to ask him to be their king also. And, it was bringing them together. All of the people of God together. That they might be one nation. And, that's going to last for a while, but then it's going to split again. Then they're going to be scattered several times. But there's a lot of things that are going to happen before that happens, but we'll read a bunch about David over the next several weeks. Anybody have anything on any of these verses in this chapter?